Welcome to Downtown Sports. My name is Downtown Stephen Brown, and in today's video, guys, we're going to be going over this Athletic article from Pierre LeBrun stating that the Maple Leafs are looking for a middle six or a top six forward, and he specifically names Ricard Raquel, which is a name that I've seen a lot of you bring up in the comment section. Now, he also states for him, the conversation would start with 2020 first-round pick Rodion Amirov, and I'm not sold on this. Now, Ricard Raquel is on a very reasonable $3.789 million for this season and next year. But that second year in his contract really complicates things for the Toronto Maple Leafs, especially if you were to pay Rodion Amirov and more for this player. I know I've been teasing a video, and I know I said I was going to release it today, Saturday. I promise Sunday that video will be out, talking about Zach Hyman and a trick that the Maple Leafs can use with his contract situation to exploit the Seattle expansion draft and not have to protect him, and also just looking over what Zach Hyman's next contract could potentially look like. So look for that video tomorrow. Now, if the Maple Leafs went the route of protecting 7 forwards, 3 defensemen, and 1 goalie, they would be leaving one of these 4 defensemen unprotected for the Seattle team to select. Either way, they're already leaving Travis Dermott unprotected. If you go the route of protecting 8 skaters, so a combination of forwards or defensemen, you can protect all 4 of these guys, and you also protect Matthews, Tavares, Marner, and Nylander, and then you're left with Kerfoot, Hyman, but remember, we're going to talk about that trick tomorrow, and Dermott exposed. So you're going to be losing either Kerfoot or Dermott, most likely to the Seattle expansion team. But if you acquire Ricard Raquel, and you pay the price that it would cost you to get Ricard Raquel away from the Ducks, who, by the way, Pierre said that they're not shopping this player, they're just listening, and when teams are listening, you're going to have to overpay to get him. If you pay that very high price, that is going to put the Maple Leafs in a situation where they would almost be forced to protect 7 forwards, 3 defensemen, and 1 goalie. Because from an asset management standpoint, or just a logical standpoint, you can't pay that very, very high price and then leave him unprotected for Seattle to take in the expansion draft and maybe possibly be forced to pay a king's ransom for them not to select that player. And then what is that player costing you? Rodion Amirov, another prospect or another pick, plus more picks so that Seattle doesn't select Ricard Raquel? To me, it doesn't make sense for the Maple Leafs to pay a high price for any forward or any defenseman with more than 1 year left on their deal if they can't protect them. Teams that are sellers at the deadline will look to sell players who have more than 1 year left on their deal, because if they do so, the team that they're selling them to can have them for 2 playoff runs, and that will net them a much larger return. But with the Seattle expansion draft being a thing that's going to happen this summer, that nullifies that altogether. I don't think that we're going to see a lot of players with multiple years left on their deal moved like we've seen in recent years. There isn't going to be a Jake Muzzin trade this year for the Toronto Maple Leafs where they get a guy who has a year and a half left on their deal. It doesn't make sense to acquire a guy, pay the insanely high price, and then give up a king's ransom to the Seattle Kraken for them not to take them in the draft. You need to be able to protect that player that you're acquiring, and the Maple Leafs can't do it. If we're looking at Ricard Raquel from an analytical standpoint, he's a good player. I'm not going to lie about that. His 19-20 season was much better than his 18-19 season. Both him and Mikael Granlund have been linked and named by NHL insiders to the Toronto Maple Leafs. Pierre LeBrun suggesting that the Leafs should go after Ricard Raquel. Elliot Friedman writing down Mikael Granlund's name on a piece of paper, saying that this is the player that he heard that the Leafs were rumored to be going after. These are both really good players. And Ricard Raquel's on a sweetheart contract for next season, but I don't think that he is good enough to justify paying that very, very high price. There are other options out there. He's an above average player offensively, just an average player defensively for the Ducks, but he does play against very high, tough competition, so you have to factor that in as well. He's a really good player carrying the puck. He's a very good player exiting his own zone with it. He creates a lot in transition. He's good at creating those high danger opportunities. Not a very strong forechecker though. If we're looking at this description here, the word from sources around NHL front offices is that the Leafs have let it be known they're poking around for a middle 6 or top 6 forward with a two-way game who is hard on the puck. But you can interpret being hard on the puck as meaning a lot of different things. Does that mean that this player is a good forechecker? Does that mean that this player is good defensively? Does that mean that this player is good carrying the puck and the puck is like glued to a stick whenever he's got it and no one can get it away from him? What does that mean? To me, that's just a buzzword. It's saying something without saying anything really, because there's no clear definition as to what that is. It's whatever you perceive it to be. But at the same time, like I already highlighted, I don't think that Ricard Raquel to the Toronto Maple Leafs makes much sense at all. Would love to have him, but you can't justify giving up that price and then not being able to protect him this summer at the Seattle expansion draft, or losing another player because you acquired this player. A lot of people have suggested Eric Staal, and he's found a way not to look awful on the Buffalo Sabres, which is an accomplishment in and of itself. There's Kyle Palmieri, who's going to be a UFA at the end of this season, who, if you look at his advanced analytics on the surface, they're garbage. They're awful. They're completely terrible, and just looking at those, you wouldn't take a second look at this player. But if you're looking at just the heat maps here and his isolated impact, finds a way to be a positive player offensively and also a positive player defensively. If I can scroll this up a little bit, you're seeing a lot of blue around his own net, and that would be a welcome addition to the Toronto Maple Leafs. There's Nick Felina, who's 33 years old, and I mean, he hasn't really found a way to be too effective offensively this year, but he is just great defensively, and he has been for a number of years now. There's Mikael Granlund, who we've discussed in depth, and I will remain on this point. Nashville's not a very good team offensively. The Toronto Maple Leafs are. I think if you take Mikael Granlund off of the Nashville Predators and you put him onto the Toronto Maple Leafs, I think he produces just like he did towards the last couple of seasons when he was still in Minnesota. This 17-18 season, amazing. This 18-19 season, amazing. I would love to have this player on our team. There's a 35-year-old Ryan Getzlab making $8.25 million, which would be very, very difficult to fit under the Maple Leafs' salary cap, even considered that the salary is prorated and they could retain 50%. Don't know if he's being traded, by the way. Just, he's a UFA, he's 35 years old. Anaheim's not very good. He could be traded to a contender and then re-sign with them. There wouldn't be any problem with that. Ryan Getzlab still has it, folks. If you take him away from the Anaheim Ducks and you put him with a contending team in maybe a little bit of a lesser role, because he still is the number one center there in Anaheim, you will see this player succeed. And if you want to take a look at all those names grouped together, plus a couple of extra guys, Kevin Papetti suggesting Vladislav Nemestikov on Twitter as some center depth that the Maple Leafs could maybe take a look at, and I don't disagree with that. He's a decent player, having a decent season this year, signed cheaply to a contract next season, and the Maple Leafs are going to need center depth this year and next year, of course. That's a third or a fourth line player. If you can acquire a guy that's a third or a fourth line player that is signed to next year, you can more than likely slip him through the Seattle draft, especially when you're already looking to expose a guy like Kerfoot and Dermott. Remember, you can only lose one guy. My point earlier was just, if the Seattle team had to pick from Raquel, Kerfoot, and Dermott, they are 100% taking Ricard Raquel. If you're looking at the options that the Maple Leafs have in the American Hockey League, Nick Robertson was just added to the taxi squad today, so we could look to see him back with the Leafs pretty soon. That would be exciting. Alex Galchenyuk also has 6 points in 5 games for the Toronto Marlies. I don't know when or if that is going to be a thing, if he ever gets called up, but he's clearly too good for the American League. Robertson had 9 points in 10 games with the Toronto Marlies, and this is definitely a player that I would describe as hard on the puck. He's hungry for it. He wants the puck on his stick. I still stand behind what I said a couple of weeks ago. The Toronto Maple Leafs will give Nick Robertson an opportunity to show whether or not he could be the player that they are looking for before they go out there and get a guy. Because if he can be, that would be the cheapest addition that they could possibly make to their team. I mean, he's just playing games down at, what are they calling it now? Coca-Cola Coliseum? And they got to shuttle him down to Scotiabank Arena. Now, they change the names of these places every 5 years. Because if we're taking a look at what the Toronto Maple Leaf lineup could possibly look like if Nick Robertson can show that he can be the guy that the Maple Leafs are looking for, that would mean that the Maple Leafs can possibly use their deadline cap space to make upgrades elsewhere. Maybe they can look for another addition at the center position. Maybe they can look at another defenseman. Cough, cough, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, David Savard, like I've talked about in other videos that I will leave a link above the screen. There's a numerous number of options and doors that open up if Nick Robertson can live up to the hype that this guy had coming out of the bubble last year and coming out of that ridiculous, historic season that he had with the Peterborough Petes last year in the Ontario Hockey League. But that's going to be it for this video, guys. Make sure to like the video if you did like it and subscribe for more, because more is always on the way. Guys, I promise the Zach Hyman video is coming tomorrow, Sunday, no matter what. It will be on Sunday.